Hi there, and welcome to the Cotswold Explorer. I'm Robin Chuckborough, and welcome in particular to our new series, Cotswold Walks. Usually you find Ross, Widget, Gizmo and me in the towns and villages of the Cotswolds, sharing their stories and telling you a little about the history of these amazing places. In this series, however, Ross, is following a selection of the many footpaths and circular walks the region has to offer. In this episode, he's doing the Swinbrook and Fullbrook circular walk. It's about 4.5 miles long and takes just under 2 hours to complete. It's considered by Ross and those more energetic than I a fairly easy route. Officially, this walk begins in the centre of the village of Swinbrook, near the church, but we decided to start at the Swan. Those of you who watch our channel regularly will remember our earlier visit to this village. We looked inside the church as well as at the Swan, the latter of which was used in the filming of the ITV drama Downton Abbey. Walk round into the village centre and enjoy the tranquil atmosphere. Swinbrook has some lovely limestone cottages, complete with a stream running through the centre. Although we didn't go inside the Church of St Mary on this occasion, we highly recommend you have a look if you're passing. In the chancel, there are some wonderful family monuments to the Fettyplace family. Clad in contemporary armour, they recline on shelves, leaning on one elbow, gazing placidly into space. They're unusual, possibly even unique, and cleverly squeeze 6 distinguished members of the family into a tiny space. The Fettyplace family held the manor of Swinbrook during the 17th century. Their wealth was so great that they owned estates in 15 counties. The original manor house no longer exists, but these remarkable monuments give us a clue as to just how influential they were. Just south of the church, it's possible to catch a glimpse of the remains of their gardens and fish ponds. It was clearly once a spectacular country residence. We carry on northwest out of the village down a quiet country road, enjoying more of the old houses of Swinbrook as we go. As you finally begin to reach the outskirts of the village, a footpath signpost will point you to your left. Now, in beautiful open countryside, you will find blackberry brambles, common hawthorns and cow parsley dotted all along the edge of this field, until you cross over a stream lined, when we were there, with yellow flags. Stooping into the shade and through some trees, we come to a high meadow full of buttercups and daisies. You should now be walking parallel to a classic Cotswold stone wall, ascending a footpath to the very end of the village, and finally waving goodbye to Swinbrook's northernmost cottages. For the next mile or so, we're walking through beautiful countryside, along an old farm track. Rather than describe every piece of scenery along this part of the journey in great detail, Ross felt it more appropriate for me to read you a short poem that not only captures our mood, but illustrates the fecundity of spring we're seeing along this walk, and hopefully accompanies his beautiful film in an appropriate manner. So how about The Enkindled Spring by D.H. Lawrence? This spring, as it comes, bursts up in bonfires green, wild puffing of emerald trees and flame-filled bushes, thorn blossom lifting in wreaths of smoke between where the wood fumes up and the watery flickering rushes. I am amazed at this spring, this conflagration of green fires lit on the soil of the earth, this blaze of growing and sparks that puff in wild gyration, faces of people streaming across my gaze. And I, what fountain of fire am I among this leaping combustion of spring? My spirit is tossed about like a shadow, buffeted in the throng of flames, a shadow that's gone astray and is lost. It's a lovely poem, and now that we've followed the track to the highest point along this walk, we can see Burford with its lovely church spire lurking in the valley to your left. We're now approaching Fullbrook from above, and not far away from us is an oak tree amongst several, so rather tricky to identify with certainty, but with a gruesome claim to fame. Some of you will remember last Halloween we told you a story of the Dunstan brothers, notorious highwaymen who lived in Fullbrook in the 1770s and 80s. They were eventually caught and executed in Gloucester, and their bodies were returned to Fullbrook, where they were gibbeted on this old oak tree just north of the village, as a discouragement to those considering a life of crime. It seems that the man charged with returning the bodies in a horse and cart got so thirsty on his journey that he stopped for a drink at the George in Burford on the way. Unbeknownst to him, this had been the favourite drinking hole of the benighted brothers, and the story goes that their spirits stayed on at the George, haunting it to this day. We descend through the fields now towards Fullbrook's Church of St. James, which soon appears in the distance. It's not long ago that we visited Fullbrook as a Cotswold gem. It's largely situated on the busy A361 between Burford and Chipping Norton, so it's easy to pass it by, but there is more to this lovely village than meets the eye. The westernmost part of the village is especially pretty, with a collection of beautiful Georgian houses and a 17th century manor house. It's a little out of our way on this walk, and we'll soon be turning back towards Swinbrook, but worth a detour if you have the time. We do, however, come within a stone's throw of the church and recommend a visit. The church is almost certainly 11th century in origin, demonstrated by the Saxon herringbone stonework on the outside south wall. Right next to this evidence of Norman lords using Saxon labour is a wonderfully preserved mass dial. If you felt so inclined, you could stop here as the halfway point in the walk, at the Carpenter's Arms, for some refreshment just a short distance into the village. We, however, are following the signs back to Swinbrook, heading up Beech Grove. This part of the village is much more modern, but it's far from intrusive amongst the ancient Cotswold buildings. As you climb up out of the village, the views are an absolute treat. Looking to the south, you can see as far as the North Wessex Downs and the White Horse Hill near Wantage. We were lucky enough to see horses and sheep grazing the fields up here, as well as lovely wild verges either side of the road. As you carry on, you'll see a small woodland on the right, which in spring we were lucky enough to see flushed with bluebells. Coming down the road, take a right turn and you'll be greeted by the most magnificent grassland avenue, lined with Scots pine, ash trees and hawthorns. This really is a highlight of the walk and a great picnic spot. As you come to the end of this avenue and climb over the stile, you can't miss the solitary chapel of St Oswald's, which belongs to the nearby hamlet of Widford. We'll have to come back and do a proper piece about Widford, but on such a beautiful day Ross couldn't resist going into this lovely little chapel. It was built on the site of an early Roman villa, and though it is mainly a 13th century building, there are signs of 11th century Saxon and Norman remnants. Roman mosaics have been uncovered in 2 areas, and several 14th century wall paintings adorn the walls. We won't go into too much detail now, as we will return, but in the immediate vicinity of the chapel you may be able to spot the outlines of former buildings where the village once stood. Completing our circle, back to Swinbrook, we found community out in force. Several groups of locals were walking their dogs in the sunshine, and others were enjoying picnics in the fields. A group of lovely high beech trees hide Swinbrook's church as you re-enter the village, and after passing down some narrow alleyways lined with Cotswold stone walls, you'll find yourself back in the village centre. Ross and his companions finished their morning with a perfect lunch at the Swan, a much-needed refreshment after their lovely walk. The mood of jollity amongst the patrons of the Swan was just as high as everybody else they'd encountered that day. It's amazing what a little spring sunshine will do. We highly recommend you give this one a try, especially when the sun is out. I hope you've enjoyed this Cotswold walk. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Press the bell icon and you'll be notified every time we upload a new video.